Hi, I'm Laura Staley, and I'm back with another video on how to format your data in Excel. I've already talked about how to format numbers in Excel and how to format text in Excel. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how to format cells. So no matter how much information you have in a cell, it will format the entire cell that way. And most of the commands that we're going to be covering are in this area, one or two, and then over in here. And so that is where we're going to go. Now I have the file that I formatted in my last video, how to format text in Excel, except I made this column a little bit wider so that it wasn't so tall. Now, we are going to cover borders, filling cells, and then various alignment options. So one of the things that I like is to put a border around my data. To me, it just makes it easier to read, especially if it's going to be printed. So I'm going to highlight everything at one time. You could just highlight a few cells if you want to set them off, but I often will highlight all of my data and then apply a border to it. So that's what I'm going to do here. So over here is the button where we can choose what we're going to do. Now, you can choose bottom, top, left, right border one at a time if you want those. I want borders all the way around. You can say no border. So if you already have a border, you want to get rid of it, you would choose this. All borders will put all of the borders outside and inside. And then there's outside borders, which is just around the square outside of whatever cells you're clicked on. Thick outside borders, which is the same thing, except the border is thicker. And then you have various other options that you can choose. So I can choose thick outside borders if I want to do that. And then I can come back here and I can choose other options. Now, personally, I like to go all the way down to the bottom and choose more borders. And I do this almost all the time when I am creating borders. So you can choose some quick options here, none, outline, or inside. So I can say, yeah, outline, and over here is the kind of border that you want. So because I chose thick outside border before I came in here, that is what is chosen. The default line is this one, which is just sort of a thin line. And so I can choose outline and inside. And what that's telling me is it's going to put a border all the way around every cell. Now, if I say, I do want those thicker borders on the outside, I can choose whatever I want and make, the thick outside border with a thinner inside. So you can choose these as shortcuts to choosing multiple borders. You can choose one border at a time. So if you click it once, it turns it off, click it again and turns it on, or vice versa. So there's top, horizontal inside, bottom, diagonals, left, vertical inside, right, and so on. So you can make this as fancy as you want, but I'm going to stick with this, the thick outside border and the thin inside border. And then I am going to click OK. And when we come out and I click off, you notice I have a thick outside border and the thin inside borders going both directions, vertically and horizontally. So to me, that just makes it easier to read. And so I like to use borders a lot, and I tend to use borders more than I use underline. I very rarely use underline because I use borders instead. Okay, does that make sense? So that's borders. Now, if I want to fill a cell with color, that is the button to the right of it. Now, the reason why I may want to do this is to set off a group of cells and make them sort of pop or stand out so that it's more understandable what they are. Usually I do this with headings, totals, or sometimes I have something to the right of my data that is like a summary, and sometimes I will apply fill colors to that so that people look at that easily. Remember, the goal of formatting in Excel is to make it more readable and understandable. So that's what you want to do in deciding what fill colors you're going to use, what borders you're going to use. And so in this case, I'm going to use sort of this turquoise color and go from there. Now, notice it's hard to read, which isn't good. So if you choose a darker color for your fill, you'll probably want a lighter color for your text. And so that we're back to being more readable. And to me, this makes sense because it makes it clear what the headings are, and then the data is underneath it. Okay, now you can also use these alignment buttons. There is the vertical alignment, so there's top, middle, and bottom. It doesn't make much sense yet because all I have are like single spacings, so there's not really any room to do vertical formatting, but I'll get there in a moment. And then there is the horizontal alignment, and so that will is it aligned to the left, center, or right? In this case, I'm going to center my headings so that, to me, that looks a little bit better and makes things more legible. Now, these cells as well, to me, they look kind of dumb being left aligned, so I'm going to center them as well. But I'm going to leave the text left aligned. To me, this makes it more readable. Now, if you don't like it, then don't do it that way. But those are some examples. Now, another thing that you can do is notice this heading. It is left aligned in the cell next to my logo, but my headings go over 2 more columns. So I can use this command. It is the merge and center, or the merging command. Now, notice that these are different cells. The text is long enough that it goes over into the next columns, and there's no data there, so it all shows. But it would be nice if my title was centered over all of the data in my sort of table there. So I am going to highlight all of the cells in that row. Merge and center will basically merge all those cells and center the text in it. Let me undo. Or I can merge across, which merges all the cells, but it leaves my text formatted the way it originally was. Or, let me undo. I can merge cells, which will do basically the same thing as the previous one, or I can unmerge cells instead of undoing. So if I did this a while ago and I really can't undo, I can come back and unmerge cells and it will unmerge them. There's been sometimes when I merged cells for a comment section and I thought I was going to have a lot of text, and so I merged a bunch of cells together, but then I found out later I didn't need that much and it was in the way, so I came back and I unmerged them and merged a smaller group of cells. So you have options. You can always undo what you did and redo it in another way. So in this case, I really like the merge and center, so I'm going to choose that. Now notice that it is centered with the logo, but I also have the option of merging all of these cells. So I'm just going to merge those cells. Now this is where my vertical alignment comes in place. The default in Excel is for a cell to be aligned to the bottom of a cell, and that's exactly what happened. In this case, I could put it on the top if I wanted that, but personally, I want it to be centered. So I have it centered vertically and horizontally now, and I think that looks about the best. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so those are some of the options that you have in your heading. Now there's one more thing I want to show you. So I'm going to add a couple of rows so that I can show those to you. I'm going to open up 2 rows underneath my blog post. So let's say I had this spreadsheet is tracking things that I do for my blog and YouTube channel. So, and I have blog posts, but let's say I want to track not different things with the blog post. So I write it, I edit it, I post it, all those types of things. So I'm going to put write in the first cell underneath blog post, and then I'm going to put edit in the second. Now, that's great, but I really would prefer that they be inset underneath blog posts so that visually you can tell that they are a subset of the blog post category. So there are these 2 buttons here that will decrease indent or increase indent. Well, since they're aligned to the left, I can't decrease, but I can click the increase indent button once or twice or 3 times, and it moves them over to set points. Now, personally, I don't think I needed that much, so I'm going to decrease indent twice, and so that looks better. Okay. So that are these 2 buttons here, sort of in the bottom of the alignment section. Okay, so those are the options that you have in formatting cells. In my next video, I'm going to talk about the Format Painter, which is one of those buttons that looks really simple, and it's a little more complicated than that, but it can save you so much time in formatting. So look for that and other videos that will be helpful to you, and I'll see you next time.